I'd like to introduce Michèle Stephenson, who is going to give our keynote this morning. Michèle is a filmmaker. She's a human rights attorney. She is an educator. She is a mom. And she's also a very exciting producer of working in new platforms. She's going to give her talk today in relation to her work, but also in the kind of practice that communities of filmmakers and documentarians and communities of color have been producing, and especially what that means in terms of her media work. So please welcome Michèle Stephenson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. How's it going? Are we getting real? Good. I want to thank Simon Kilmurray and Claire Aguilar and the entire IDA team for inviting me to share with you my journey in filmmaking and working in immersive media. It's an opportunity for me to share my personal thoughts. For those of you who don't know me, because it is kind of a small community, I am a nonfiction storyteller, and together with my filmmaking partner, Joe Brewster, we founded the Rada Film Group in Brooklyn, New York. We started our work not necessarily by focusing on inclusion and diversity, but really putting justice and expressing our complicated existences front and center of the stories that we tell. That's what drove us. But with that in mind, we gradually came to see that justice in the context of documentary film always involves power dynamics of who is telling whose stories, how emerging technology and documentary film are made and their resources distributed. But also it involves seeing or understanding which storytellers, which engineers and audiences do we see and validate. So with that task in mind, my fundamental question here, am I going to get real at getting real? Right here, right now? What do I stand to lose? One fear I may have is of rejection, banishment from the documentary community, not getting that next grant or that Netflix deal, or never getting another speaking engagement. But today's climate requires some risks. And you know what? I've decided to get real. But getting real starts with getting personal. And it starts in the beginning from my childhood. This photo, captures my 9-year-old skeptical self. My dad's profile is to your right at the edge of the photograph. We are recently arrived Black immigrants to a bucolic rural location in Quebec, Canada. I was born in Haiti to a Haitian father and a Panamanian mother. As a daughter of the Caribbean and Latin America, the violent legacy of genocide, colonialism, slavery, and skin color privilege literally run through my veins. It has shaded and shaped my family, how I see the world and interact with others. It is my lived experience. But I believe that none of us with generations on the soils of the Americas, from as far north as the Hudson Bay to the southern tips of Argentina, can escape that violent legacy. Its roots go far and deep and are complicated. I'm also part of a family who fled into exile from Haiti's Papa Doc Duvalier's brutal dictatorship in the 60s. I have no memory of that flight, but I grew up immersed in my father's magical realist stories of taking over Haiti with his rebel friends. As a child, I remember how he would disappear once a week to meet with his comrades and plot a return invasion to Haiti to overthrow the government. And at bedtime, he would weave these fantastical stories about a glorious mountainous Haiti of his childhood, and how he would one day return, and how we all had to resist and fight injustice. That's some heavy stuff for a little girl. But these stories shaped my sense of self and how I processed our migration and settling to North American territory, where we all faced regular racial aggressions as Black Latinx immigrants. But my father's dreams of a gallant return to Haiti, like Don Quixote, never happened. His only sense of control or power was over my mother and me. A brutal dictatorship reigned in the heart of our home. I was afraid of him and his wrath. But back then, I did not understand that global systemic forces had shaped my father's limitations and the deep-seated contradictions between his idealism and his deeply flawed behavior at home. So I clung to his idealism. That's me with the mouth wide open at the age of 24, laughing about to cut a piece of cake, full of hope, doing the work of the United Nations Development Program in Cape Verde, West Africa. I was convinced I could make a difference in global development work, but not all was well. I quickly found myself in the belly of the beast. I was a tool in a system that extracted more than it gave. When I ordered a tractor for a project or hired a consultant, certain conditions had to be met that benefited the so-called donor countries. And I myself was benefiting from an unequal pay scale within the UN system, where I, who was fresh out of college, getting trained by talented local staff, was getting paid twice their salaries. There was justifiable resentment and tension between local and international staff. It all felt like the repurposing of old colonial structures. I felt ill at ease and sick. Survival meant closing my eyes. It meant getting less real. But the deepest contradiction for me was how this structure was connected to the lot and suffering of my family members spread across the Haitian and Latinx diaspora. I was part of the problem and had to get out. So I went to law school. But that didn't do it either. Just as I started law school, I met my partner, Joe Brewster. While I'd always been involved in the arts as much as I could, mostly dance and photography, I couldn't quite wrap my head around how I could marry my political convictions with art. It seemed like a faraway, economically unattainable possibility. Meeting Joe shifted that aspiration for me, and I went in full throttle. I went to law school, but I found film. The first film I was involved with was a fiction piece, my partner's first feature film, The Keeper. It premiered at Sundance, and it tells the story of a light-skinned Black prison guard who begins to question his role in the criminal justice system. But developing that story actually became a deep dive into my own self-examination, my own responsibility and accountability to my communities and to myself. The role of story became a looking glass experience for me, and I was hooked. Film became a way of both dealing with my frustrations and feeling like maybe I was getting a little step closer to possible personal and community liberation. I quickly moved from fiction to nonfiction storytelling to occupy a space where I could question, explore, and bear witness. Fast forward to our third feature documentary, American Promise, a 13-year journey where Joe and I decided to embark on one of the most challenging experiences of our lives, to make a film about our son's educational journey. I personally started off with one idea in mind, but in reality ended up making a film about myself along the way. It was a deep dive that went way beyond the questions raised in The Keeper. Here is the trailer.
Idris,
Yeah?
tell me about your girlfriend.
I don't have a girlfriend. You're just shy. I'm not shy.
Idris is extremely bright.
Shayon's creativity is exceptional.
What we teach at Dalton is to teach them they have a voice.
It's my best school and I love it there. I would like to be a professional basketball player when I grow up.
I want Cheyenne to be comfortable around white folks because I think even at this point, I am not comfortable around white folks.
How do you feel about being one of the few black kids there? Is that ever an issue?
No, it's never an issue. Good try, Chris.
Dalton will open doors for him for the rest of his life. You see the inauguration? At one point, I was thinking what we're doing could pay off in something like this. Not that I want you to be the president of the United States.
I'm not going really good in school. I get really frustrated.
My basketball team, they said, oh, you talk like a white boy.
They told us that our son is a hard-to-manage guy. They don't know him.
There's a cultural disconnect between independent schools and African-American boys, and the question is why?
I hate school. It's bad, it's hard. The problem is focusing in class.
After you leave Dalton, where do you go?
I really don't want to leave.
I don't think it was, frankly, a good match for him.
I'd be better off if I was white. Isn't that true?
This is unacceptable. Sit up.
It's laziness.
Something is wrong with my child.
People would say, wow, you're controlling his entire life. Well, I think we weren't controlling enough.
Dad is not giving up on you. I'm hard because I want you to be a better man than I am.
I think I'm ready for college.
I can't take life for granted.
This feels so right.
She's calling my name.
There's nothing you can't do in this world. We back you up all the way.
Triumph Award goes to Shea Summers. This is just the beginning.
Even through all the struggles, I feel like I'm going places.
You should be proud.
So, American Promise began as an exploration of an educational system that on the surface was embracing diversity, but underneath was perpetuating inequity for Black boys. But as Black middle-class filmmakers telling a Black middle-class story, certain gatekeepers needed convincing. It didn't fit that usual extractive documentary model. Was there room for Black middle-class stories in documentary film? But I too began to question the process of my own exceptionalism. My potential role as an overseer in a system of exploitation, in the very documenting of an educational system that was rigged against our communities. More importantly, on this journey of filming my family, was I practicing a version of subjugation on my child that my father had imposed upon me? Was I repeating generational trauma? But the rich relationship that I now have with my children and the enthusiasm for this film that spanned the nation and globally led me to believe that we had done the right thing. Screening the film was never enough for audiences. People had questions. The looking glass was now a mirror for others to see themselves. The debate and dialogue spilled over more than we could have ever imagined. We had touched a nerve that was raw. It sparked a revolution for parents and educators. And we did it by being vulnerable and connecting systemic inequality to our own very specific racialized lived experiences that others like us immediately recognized. It was galvanizing. We were our audience. On tour with American Promise Community Engagement Campaign, I also participated in a number of deep dive workshops on undoing racism. One workshop in particular resonates with me today. It provided a space to examine how I, as a person of color, experienced and practiced internalized oppression on a daily basis. The facilitator pulled up this slide of a tabletop with these two very sturdy legs beneath it. When I saw the simple graphic, a light bulb instantly lit up for me. I now could better understand my purpose and the direction for my artistic work and practice. The facilitator explained it like this. In order for the structural tabletop of white supremacy, patriarchy, and other systemic inequities to persist, that table needs two strong legs. On the one leg is the institutions, whether it's the criminal justice system, government schools, foundations, the IDA, the film industry, or emerging media, that keep recreating that cycle of inherited oppression by default, and if not questioned, repeat. Then the other leg is me and you. It is us, the individuals that make up the institutions, and more specifically, those of us who create culture, where internalized attitudes and consciously and unconsciously are consciously and unconsciously replicating white dominance and other systemic inequities in all of our relationships. We can't escape it. It is the air that we breathe. But with storytelling and artistic expression, I have a tool that I choose to use to chip away at that internalized cultural leg, both within me and in my connections with others in the creative process. So while I'm solidly grounded in cultural work with the communities I'm a part of, I know that, however slowly, my intentional process and my product work towards dismantling the pillars that uphold systemic injustice. As long as I can stay self-aware, forgive myself when I make mistakes, I can keep doing the work. My spirit these days lie in challenging some core ideas, like what we mean by inclusion and allyship. It's often being used in white dominant liberal spaces. Those are two terms that I personally find deeply problematic. I reject the term ally because for me, being an ally implies you are doing something for me, to help me, or to help another group in need. When in reality, we must all believe that we are doing the work, whether in storytelling or elsewhere, to save ourselves. White supremacy, patriarchy, and other forms of oppression negatively affect us all. And until we understand that we have skin in the game, both privileged and non-privileged, we can't expect inclusion will solve the problems of power and subjugation. And inclusion implies there is a better, superior place that marginalized folks should be brought into. But in reality, that space is often already toxic from its roots because decision-making power is not questioned. And so, inclusion and allyship are, to me, traps for maintaining a status quo and not getting at the root of how structural inequality perpetuates itself and how we are all involved in it, especially as creators of culture. And listening to and reading the work and interviews with Toni Morrison and Claudia Rankine have really helped me unpack some of that. It's also helped me ground my personal work and how I mentor and teach. Toni Morrison often talks about how the problem of American society when it comes to racialized peoples lies in the pathology of white identity and dominance. She rejects the white gaze on her community and rather turns that gaze on its head, suggesting white people need to look at themselves and the pathological behaviors that have emerged with privilege for the sake of maintaining white dominance. For example, we could look at the case of documentary storytelling. We may all suffer from not truly getting enough complicated pictures of stories of Southern white working class people and life because perhaps it messes with and might too deeply question the true source of white power and domination. And Claudia Rankine started the Racial Imaginary Institute to deeply question how our collective imaginary is framed around a lens of white dominance and supremacy. How can we create space to shift and or interrogate that in our work? This past summer, the Racial Imaginary Institute has had a number of symposiums, screenings, and exhibitions, provoking thought and engaging artists of all types. I can't wait to see more of it. These are exciting times, and I, as a storyteller, definitely work in the imaginary constantly. What kind of racial imaginary am I creating, challenging, or perpetuating in my work? I have to be open to self-interrogation. So what does that all mean from a practical standpoint as a storyteller? I'm continuously trying to work that out. It is a daily routine of self-awareness and commitment to creativity and personal and community growth. How do I show up when I think about the stories I want to tell? How do I show up when I work with my partner to decide what team we would like to build for our story projects? How do I engage the subjects in our stories? And when and how do I check my own light-skinned cisgendered privilege in the team building exercises we do on our various projects? The list is long and ever present. I am a work in progress. But some of these daily efforts were put into practice with our New York Times OpDocs conversation series on race. We built a collective of filmmakers, Geeta Gambhir, Blair Foster, Perry Peltz, Joe Brewster, and myself, where we were intentional about co-directing across our differences as a team, and we challenged each other in the process. And we engaged our subjects to go deep. The series has reached over 40 million views. It's a testament to having touched a raw nerve again, and how daily practice and intention in co-creation can resonate in limitless ways. My current feature doc work in progress has taken me to the island where I was born, forcing me to reckon with this color caste system there. Hispaniola examines the lives of Dominicans of Haitian descent, whose citizenship was ripped from them by the Dominican government. I knew that as a woman of Haitian descent, I needed to use my light-skin privilege to access certain emotionally difficult spaces with people who engaged in anti-Black hatred as part of their life, in order for me to get a deeper, and for the film, a more deeper, complex picture of the extent of the impact of global white supremacy on the island. Here's a quick teaser of the work in progress.
On the 23rd of September 2013, the Constitutional Tribunal of the Dominican Republic published its judgment, which gave consideration to the legal status of immigrants to the Dominican Republic and their offspring since 1929.
This ruling impacts descendants of immigrants of Haitian descent and who came to the Dominican Republic to work primarily in the sugarcane fields.
And now, in one fell retroactive swoop, condemned to the indignity of statelessness.
Children born in the Dominican Republic with Haitian grandparents are facing the possibility of mass deportation.
275,000 personas.
Con bombas lacrimógenas, disparos, agentes policiales dispersaron cientos de haitianos.
Pero estamos hartos ya de todo maldito haitiano.
Este país se hizo sobre las manos de los dominicanos.
¿Cómo puede considerarse que la República Dominicana es un país racista si más del 80% de nuestra población está constituida por negros y mulatos?
¡Abusadores!
La Constitución nuestra dice que el que nace aquí es de aquí.
The impact of this ruling could be catastrophic.
So I couldn't get to talking about emerging media without making sense of and tracking my own creative and personal evolution that brought me to occupy that space. There's no separating my creative energy from the political. I've come also to understand how our stories can risk being ignored, removed, appropriated, or reinterpreted by dominant culture. So virtual reality almost felt like a duty to occupy the space, a duty to explore my creativity in that space and channel my ancestors. I also discovered that I had a community waiting for me, ready to support, guide, and mentor. People of color were already there, doing the work, and in many cases were pioneers in the field. In her series, Making a New Reality, Kamal Sinclair, one of our sister pioneers in the field, takes a deep dive investigating strategies for achieving equality and justice in emerging media. It is a must-read for anyone wishing to enter the field and a great blueprint for doing similar research in our own documentary space. The series on multiple occasions points to how our communities are here and have been here since the beginning. In some cases, it is not a matter of inclusion, but of simply seeing further than our silos. Each of these women and man have pioneered the emerging media space in one form or another and have touched and supported my work. From Shari Frilo's New Frontiers Festival, back in the beginning when for me, she had created an immersive space of creative inspiration and respite from the stress and pressures of the Sundance Film Festival, to Jackie Jones's founding the New Media Institute back in 2006 with the bold, beautiful ideas of turning Jackson, Mississippi into a completely wired space for Black creativity. I can go on. Noni de la Peña, the virtual reality pioneer of our day, and her mentoring both Joe and me at the Tribeca New Media Fund retreat. To Ann Bennett and her pioneering work with Thomas Allen Harris's Digital Diaspora Interactive Project. Her patience to meet with me and just brainstorm ideas of how we could work on a truly interactive digital campaign for our film, American Promise. And the New Media Institute participated and supported with the work of Leslie Fields Cruz and Christian Ugbode, founded by the Black Public Media, specifically allowed me to incubate and execute multiple web-based interactive projects, from Pawn Shop Chronicles to Haiti One Day, One Destiny. They had laid a stake on the ground from way back. Those experiments, mentorships, and collaborations allowed me and our team at Rada Film Group to dig deeper on what type of emerging media was relevant to our communities. For our American Promise community engagement campaign, we developed a prototype for a phone app for Black parents. It was a behavior change app developed in consultation with the Stanford Behavior Design Lab to assist parents in improving educational outcomes for Black boys. The Promise Tracker was built using a deep community involvement model. We incubated the work with thanks to the support of Wendy Levy at BAVAC and the Tribeca New Media Fund under Ingrid Kopp and Opiemi Olukemi, as well as with the support from the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. Although we did not fully realize the launch because of funding challenges for marketing and outreach, the lessons were invaluable. New technology was totally doable for us. Taking risk in the field and being okay with failure was a must. And teamwork was an indispensable part of the process. So fast forward to 2 years ago and the opportunity provided by Sundance and Skoll's Stories of Change program, and the bigger idea of the Changing Same emerged. On this project, I've been standing on the shoulders of my ancestors and embracing my father's spirit, accepting him, his flaws, and all. Our story cannot appeal to anyone's sense of guilt, but needs rather to inspire folks to recognize our common history and our common fate. The Changing Same is a groundbreaking, immersive virtual reality room-scale installation where the user travels through time and space on a pilgrimage to visit events of our common racialized history and present-day lived experiences. Our virtual reality story world embodies the idea that slavery never ended It has simply evolved. It uses cutting-edge reality capture techniques with profound storytelling to create an innovative, immersive documentary that is native for this medium, a first of its kind. And we are currently scheduled to go into production later this fall in collaboration with some kick-ass partners. Scatter Studios, who we've created a collective with, POV Spark, MIT, the Fledgling Fund, and Chicken and Egg have joined the journey. I can't show the demo because I'm running out of time, sorry. So I gotta go. Yeah. All right, I'll go for it. It's, so the demo shows some clips from our short film that's connected to the project, as well as some volumetric 3D capturing techniques that we're using.
Paranoia is a very healthy thing in a town like this. It may keep you alive. Claude's body, chiseled and mangled, hangs in an oak by a rope. There is nothing in this body we can desire and we want. We want a body not mangled like ours. We can love without shame.
Everything changes, but nothing changes. The years pass, people live and die. But these ideas about who's on the top and who's beneath and who should stay in their place, those things don't change.
So the immersive experience places you in parallel story worlds that span hundreds of years, and the search for light becomes a metaphor for hope and change from one story world to the next, as we unearth buried histories and present-day realities. Magical realist time travel allows us to lyrically move through the past, present, and future, to contemplate the cycles of history and their strong influence on our lived experiences today. How much has really changed, and how have experiences mutated? Through a magical realist lens, we can envision a new future where we can dream of a space or community where racial terror is acknowledged and differences are viewed through a distinct transformative lens. So, how am I getting real in my work? How are we getting real? Carl Jung once said, "The reason for evil in the world is that people are not able to tell their stories." But I would flip that and say that evil persists when we refuse to see that other stories exist and are being told on their own terms with their own purpose. We claim the space. Others cannot do the work for me or my people or my communities. Getting real for me is about seeing the power in being vulnerable and occupying space, not letting others occupy the space for me, but also understanding the complexity of my own privileges. If we can't reckon with these issues, we can't do the work, and creativity suffers. Let's challenge ourselves to be a community, a network, a world in which what we have inherited is not what we perpetuate. That takes self-awareness, practice, patience, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. Thank you.